Here's a case we saw just recently where a patient had a crystal lens placed several years ago and never was really happy with the vision and ended up with the Z-syndrome and was sent in for an exchange. So whenever we're tackling an IOL exchange, I always like to make 3 paracenteses. You almost always need a nasal paracentesis to help visco-dissect the capsular bag. I suppose you could do it with only 2, but 3 certainly helps out. We'll also make our standard 2.4 millimeter wound for removal and replacement of the intraocular lens. Now, especially with silicone IOLs, you tend not to get too much fibrosis right on the optic, so dissecting these lenses right at the haptic-optic junction usually makes sense, and you can see that viscoelastic or OVD make a nice wave. The crystal lens in particular is really difficult to get those terminal haptics to free up at the equator of the capsular bag. And to try and make a little more room in the anterior segment, you can remove the optic by cutting it at the haptic-optic junction, right at the little hinges, if you will, of the crystal lens. And you can see there using that nasal paracentesis to help visco-dissect. So we're going to very carefully cut the haptics off the IOL. And then I love to cut IOL, so I'll cut this into 2 or 3 pieces and then remove it through the temporal incision. I think the smaller pieces just help to not stress out the wound. You don't have to pull real hard. It just, to me, it seems a little bit more gentle to remove. But now that the haptic is gone, there's a lot more space in the eye, and there's many more surgical angles that we can make use of to try and free up these haptics. And I can tell you, they are really hard to remove. In fact, I give up figuring I'm just going to end up causing losses zonules if I keep pulling on these things. In fact, you can see the equator of the lens right there. So I just use a small scissor and cut the haptics as short as possible. There's a lot of PCO in this patient, so we're using a Terry squeegee to just carefully visco-dissect off any scar tissue off the posterior capsule. And then the bag is wide open, except for at the very, very edges where those haptics are fibrosed in. So we'll put our single-piece acrylic lens in and just orient the haptics about 9 degrees away from where the stuck-in haptics are. Now, it kind of hurts my pride a little bit to leave that much haptic, so we're going to go back in again and just cut the little polyamide pieces off of the crystal lens haptic, and at least I can get most of this haptic out of the eye. But in the end here, we have our new lens. It's in the capsular bag. There is a little bit left over the old haptics, but you don't have to get all the haptic out to do a successful in-the-bag IOL exchange. Thanks for watching.